As some of you know, St Christopher's Hospice was set up by Dame Cicely Saunders, who was who's widely recognised as the founder of the modern hospice movement. And she was a real trailblazer in her day. And when I think of the word trailblazer, the other person who springs immediately to my mind is Nigel Hartley. Not only has he been changing the lives of people in his care for many years, but also a much wider audience. He has been very generously sharing his experience and insight through his very practical and insightful publications, through his teaching, and through days like today. So we are absolutely thrilled to have Nigel here. So please extend a warm welcome to Nigel Hartley.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be here with you today. I feel quite humbled, and hopefully what I have to say will be quite useful. My name's Nigel, and I'm a musician. It's taken me a number of years to be able to say that out loud with confidence. I've worked in healthcare for 30 years. I did a degree initially in psychology, and my whole plan was to be a concert pianist. I won a British Council scholarship, and when I was 21, someone shut the car door on my left hand, and that was the end of that. Although it probably, looking back, was the best thing that could have happened for all kinds of reasons. I began my career in 1988 at London Lighthouse, which was the first HIV and AIDS hospice where I worked as a music therapist and as a counsellor. And then I moved to a hospice in Oxford and then to St Christopher's prior to coming to the Isle of Wight in Hampshire about 4 years ago. The hospices on the Isle of Wight in Hampshire, budget of around 16 million a year. We have around 400 staff and around 700 volunteers. We cover a population of 1.2 million people, and we are hopefully trying to create the best organisation we can for the future and for the people that we look after. I think one of the key things for me as I've gone through my life and through my career has been realising that being a musician is probably absolutely core to how I behave, how I think, both in my life and in my work. And I'd like to share some of those thoughts with you today as to why I think that's important. I'd like to tell some truths, acknowledging that they're my truths and not yours. I'd like to talk around what happens when a musician or an artist finds themselves leading an organisation and how that feels and how it is. I'd like to talk around crisis a little bit and change. I think the world is at an incredibly critical time in terms of what's happening and how the arts can do, what the arts can bring to that, I think could be incredibly potentially powerful. I'd like to talk about creative individuals, organisations and communities and what use the arts are in all of those ways. A little bit about health promotion if I get time, and I'm going to share with you some examples. And if you remember nothing I say today, I hope that you remember the things that you hear and the examples that you witness. I think the world needs more artists as leaders. I think the world would be a very different place if artists were actually in control of it. And I also think, what we're not, or certainly from my perspective, I'm not talking around the arts as being used in care or for care or through care. The arts, I think, are inherently caring themselves. And I think that's a really important point. The arts are kind, they're generous, and they call people in. I also, having gone through healthcare, feeling as a music therapist as if I'm the lowest of the low and right at the bottom of the rung in terms of hierarchy, believe that my discipline as a pianist and as an improviser and as a therapist is just as great, if not greater, as a medical consultant. The hours I've had to practice, the hours of time I put into it to get things right. And I think we need to be more confident about our craft and how that's put together. I think we are our own worst enemy sometimes in how we talk about what we do. I think I get very tired of expressing oneself, of catharsis, of the arts as a way of letting out feelings. I think the arts are much, much more than that. I think they bring people together as opposed to segregate them and pull them apart. I also think the arts and music are full of structures and systems, repetition and order, opposites and contrasts. I think we have all of these things at our fingertips, and we need to be able to articulate what we do and how we do it. I think arts in health is like fitting a square peg in a round hole. I think healthcare is full of assessing risk and the fear of getting things wrong. Arts and music are about taking risks and getting things wrong regularly. And how those two things fit together, I don't think we talk enough about them and how difficult it is. I always say to the people I work with, it's okay to make a mistake. I do it all the time as an improvising musician, but every mistake I make is an opportunity for something different. And I think we can bring a very different perspective to a healthcare system that's actually so obsessed with getting things wrong and so obsessed with being afraid. I always think as well that how we talk about what we do is not the same as doing it, and there's no excuse for lazy language. So how we find a language to talk about what we do is absolutely critical. And what happens, I think, is we tend to get carried away and use language from other disciplines in order to try and describe what it is we're doing. I think that's incredibly confusing. And no wonder people think that we don't know what we're talking about. I think there's the whole issue of paying attention and listening, and how we do that through art and through music is absolutely at the core of who we are and what we do, and there's something very unique about what we can bring to the table. The biggest compliment someone ever gave to me was when they told me I was dangerous. Dangerous can be a really good thing, and actually we mustn't be afraid of it. I also, and this may not be relevant so much today, but going back 30 years, I think people were really shocked to find a real musician working as a music therapist. I think many bad musicians and artists go into the arts and health, and we need to actually claim that we're actually good at what we do, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's really important that we are good at our craft. There's no excuse for not being. And the arts in health and the arts therapies are not a place to come and not take the arts seriously. I've been managed by a range of different healthcare professions over the years, by a nurse, a medic, a social worker, various other people. And I suppose reflecting on that, I wonder whether we do manage and we lead from our own professional discipline. And when a musician is leading an organisation, what does that look like? I think like a musician every day of my life. I behave like one. I look for flow. I work around things. I'm trying to find the way through problems and issues rather than just being stopped by them. And that's what, as an improvising musician, I'm doing when I'm playing music. And I really want to articulate what that's like. When it happens. I think it's a bit of a shock for most of healthcare professionals. I was talking to Maeve last night around how I manage a team of medical consultants, and the tensions that sometimes can come with that, with nurses, with all kinds of other professionals, who, for whatever reason, think they know better than you. So the uniqueness of how we lead from our own professional background, the strength that brings, but also maybe the difficulties that sometimes brings. So what is unique and what is it we can bring as leaders? So I'm going to pause for my first example. So Mary is in her late 60s and she's coming to the end of her life with advanced lung disease. I was walking through the inpatient unit of a hospice I worked in one day. I think I'd been to see a patient and I was walking back to my office. And as I walked down the corridor, I happened to look to the side of me and the door to a room was open. And in this room, a lady was lying in bed, waving at me. So I went in through the door thinking, well, maybe she thinks I'm a doctor or maybe she thinks I'm a nurse. It's incredible how we go to that place, isn't it, that actually she doesn't really want me, she wants something different. And that process of being an artist or a musician, you know, sitting there this morning wondering, actually, am I going to be able to get up there and do this? What's going to happen? Am I going to fall apart? Am I going to say something stupid? Will I fit it into the time I've got? Will I start crying? Will the sky fall in? All of that stuff that we as artists and musicians go through every day of our life. And actually, we mustn't ignore it, because I think it's a really important part of the process. So in I go to see Mary. And she is lying up in bed with lots of cushions, with an oxygen mask on and a big oxygen bottle next to the bed. And she pulled the mask off and she says, "Someone told me that you can play the piano." She didn't say, "Oh, you know, someone said you're a psychologist or you're a therapist," or she said, "Someone told me you can play the piano." So I said, "Yes, I can play the piano." She said, "Have you got a room with the piano in?" I said, "Yes, I do." She said, "Take me there." So, like any good self-deprecating musician, I went and asked the nurse whether that was all right. So the nurse and myself came back into the room and we helped Mary out of bed into a wheelchair, made her comfortable, and off I went with Mary down the corridors with the oxygen bottle trailing behind, clanking away, into the lift and down into my office, into my room. So Mary settled down and I sat there. And for about half an hour, I tried to work out what Mary really wanted. So I said, "Do you want me to play the piano for you? Do you want to talk about something? Do you want me to put on a CD or something to listen to?" And every time I suggested anything, she just shook her head. I began to think maybe she just wants to spend half an hour with a man in a room. Anything's possible. And after about half an hour, I asked Mary the question I really probably should have asked her right at the beginning. But it's an incredibly powerful question. And I said to her, "Mary, what do you really want?" And I think when we ask that question, you can't ask someone that question and then turn around and say, "No, you can't have it." So when we ask that question, we have to ask it from a place of confidence and assurance and the fact that we're able to try and give someone what it is they're wanting. So I said, "Mary, what is it you want?" And she went into her dressing gown pocket. She had a black blanket over her knees and pulled out some pieces of paper that she unfolded. And on that paper, she had handwriting written all over it. And she pulled the mask off and she said, "I want to sing a song." I was quite relieved at that point. I said, "That's great, you can sing a song." I went over, I said, what have you got written down? And on the paper were all the words written down to "My Way." You don't have to be Freud to realise why someone might want to sing "My Way" at the end of their life. So I said, "Great, Mary, we can sing "My Way." So off I went to the piano. Actually, interestingly, at the beginning of this conversation, which I didn't say, there was a big tape recording machine on my desk because I tape recorded a lot of the stuff that we did, mostly from some of the research I was doing. And Mary had pointed at it, which was when I said, "Do you want me to put on a CD?" And she said no. And I said, "Well, do you want me to record us together?" And she said yes. So I'd already put a tape on. So I said to Mary, "Great, we can sing "My Way." And I went to the piano, put my hands on the keys, and thought, shit, I've never played "My Way" in my life before. So again, I go to that place, I can't do this. I just promised this woman that we can do "My Way," and actually I can't play it. So I'm madly trying to remember Frank Sinatra singing "My Way." Of course, I heard it, it's going through my head. Two things happen. The first isn't really that important, and that's the fact that I play "My Way," and I'll tell you a bit about that afterwards. But the second, and I think quite interesting thing, is that Mary sings the whole song without using any oxygen. At the end of the recording, she said that she wanted to come and record it because she wanted it to be played at her funeral. and it was played at her funeral about 10 days later. I remember I want to talk about listening a little bit this afternoon in the workshop a bit more, but one of the things I'm doing, you can hear I'm literally a millisecond behind her because I'm listening to every note, every dynamic, the quality of every sound she's making, trying to be in the right place with her. But underneath, I have this level of monologue going on, thinking, shit, she's going to die. She can't possibly, she needs to use some oxygen. So, what's the nurse going to say when I have to go back and tell her she's died? And all of that stuff, of course, is going on underneath. And I remember at the end of it, because my back was to her. She was sitting over here. And I eventually turned, and just for 1 second, I saw this bright, healthy, beautiful woman. And she just put the mask on and slumped back into her chair. And there's something around how music lifts us out, both myself and her, because I can't play My Way without Mary. mean, if you gave me a piano now, I'd play it probably, but I'd have to really think through it. So she gives me a new experience of being able to play my way, and I think that's an extraordinary thing that we do with the arts, is what we give to each other, and how we enable Mary to have the experience of herself as being a musician at that time in her life. I talked about the world needing more artists as leaders. Chekhov said any idiot can face a crisis, but it's the day-to-day living that wears you out. I think Theresa May is proving him incredibly wrong. But I think if Donald Trump and Theresa May were artists and musicians, my God, the world would be a very different place. They have no grace. They have no generosity. We're living in a world run by idiots, and actually we're sitting here and letting it happen. And how we as artists and musicians can change that, I think, may be some of the answer to the question we need to listen to. But the world is in crisis in different ways. And of course, the people we work with are in crisis. And how we support them with what we do, and how that ripples out into the communities and into the organisations that we work for is really, really important. I arrived at the hospice on the Isle of Wight 4 years ago, and I wanted to go somewhere incredibly challenging and a bit different after being at St Christopher's. There were a number of issues, but one of the things I noticed very, very quickly was all of the doors were locked and there was no artwork on the walls. And as we began to unlock doors and create artwork ourselves to put on the walls, I noticed people behaving differently. I noticed people stopping and having different conversations, and art slowing people down as they walk by it. I mean, how extraordinary. And people have no idea that that is why they're behaving differently, of course. But to watch that and to see an organisation develop and change was extraordinary. There's nothing wrong with being proud of who we are. I was listening to myself playing my way thinking, you know what, I'm bloody good, actually. And of course, there's always that dilemma, isn't there, of arrogance and ego against sort of self-doubt and deprecation. But we need to tell our best story. We need to be out there telling people the good of who we are and the good of the work that we do. And we need to tell the truth. So many people don't. So many people try and fabricate something to get attention or to get people to buy into what they're trying to do. But the work, I think, that we do speaks for itself, and it's the work that we need to show and share with people. But one of the questions I always ask myself as I'm working is, how can I be the best that I can be? It's impossible to do that all the time. But how can we be the best that we can be? Because I think it's contagious when we are. And people around us also bring out the best in them. And then what does that look like when an organisation is doing that together? Sometimes people walk into the hospice and say, gosh, you can feel there's something important going on here. And that kind of collective drive and motivation can actually change the way organisations are. And of course, that can ripple out into the community. Some months ago, the hospice is open to the public, and at the heart of it, we have a cafe, and every Sunday we do Sunday lunch. It's open 365 days a year. We had 80 people in for Christmas lunch last Christmas Day, people who would be by themselves. We have these extraordinary buildings. Why would we close them? Why wouldn't we just use them to their capacity and sweat the resource that we've got? So one Sunday I was doing some work catching up, and I went down to the cafe, and there was an older gentleman came over to me, and he said, you're the boss, aren't you? I always feel a bit worried when people say that to me. So I sort of looked at him and I said, well, yes, I am. He said, I just want to tell you that coming here has changed my life. And when he said that, he really got my interest, of course. So I looked at him and I thought, well, who are you? Are you a patient? Are you a bereaved relative? Or anyway, it turns out he was called Bill, and he was a guy in his 80s who lived down the road from where the hospice is. And every Sunday he'd heard about Sunday lunch, and he'd come in and bought himself Sunday lunch. So I said to him, well, Bill, I said, Sunday lunch changing your life, that's quite a big deal. And he said, oh, no, it's nothing to do with the lunch. He said, people here are kind to me. And I think, if Bill has that experience, he's more likely to go out into his life, into his community, and be kind to other people. Kindness is contagious. And I think, the way we use our art forms, the way we are as people, can influence the people around us in that way. Dying is changing, and I think how we care for people, therefore, is changing. The modern hospice movement opened with a 60-bedded inpatient unit in southeast London. On the Isle of Wight, we look after 1,200 people a day in their own homes, with 16 beds in a building and a sort of outpatient public centre that's open to anyone. The numbers of people we're caring for has gone up by 50% in the last year. So a year ago, I'd be telling you we look after 650 people a day at home. We're now looking after just over 1,200. More and more people need what we have, and we can no longer play a postcode lottery with people's lives, whatever disease they've got. People die in all kinds of ways. On the Isle of Wight, we're told we're 20 years ahead of the rest of the UK in terms of demographic, our older population. People are living longer, therefore they're dying slower. And actually, the care and the services that we provide to people, because of that, need to be different. And I think if dying is going to be a longer process for most people, then actually we need less intensive and expensive resources. And we need more of the arts, more music, more ways of bringing people together, of dealing with social death. People die socially long before they die physically. So 1 in 6 households on the Isle of Wight are over the age of 65. And there's single people living alone. That provides a huge challenge. That is the world we're moving into. And actually, we can't leave people alone when they're vulnerable and when they're dying. And I think what we offer comes really into its own when we're actually supporting those people. No longer are people coming to us just with cancer. People are coming to us with cancer and dementia and heart failure, a range of comorbidities that are actually challenging the skills of palliative medical consultants and specialists. People need to train differently because we need different things. We need creative individuals, creative organisations and creative communities. And when I talk about creative individuals, I'm not just talking about any old self-conscious baboon. I'm talking about people like Mozart and Shakespeare and Seamus Heaney. But when we look into the research of what creative individuals do and how they behave, we come across time and time again courage, persistence, having nerve, taking risks, making mistakes, finding patterns and making connections, not being self-limited but full of curiosity, wondering what's going to be, what's it going to be like, what's going to happen, and full of potential and possibility. We need to be proud of our DNA, and we need to be able to articulate it to people. Don't pretend that we're something we're not, but really try and articulate what we are. And of course, creative organisations need to attract creative people. And by doing that, they need to enable them to be the best they can be. But actually, we know as artists, sometimes we need our creativity harnessed a little bit because we can get out of control quite quickly if we're not careful. So we need to translate our creativity into services that people really want and need. I am so fed up with someone saying, I've got an idea of doing this with a group of people. Ask them what they want. A lot of people don't know what they want, but starting from that premise, I think, stops us imposing things on people. We also need to foster new ideas within a structure which is not obsessed with formal controls and bureaucracy, and hopefully, certainly at the hospice that I work at, we challenge that all the time. We can't do that because. When I opened St Christopher's, I was part of a group of people who opened St Christopher's to the public, amongst great outcry from some of our medical and nursing colleagues, because they were terrified of what was going to happen. And I remember saying to them one day, you know what, at some point in the future, something terrible will happen, because this is life. But just because at that one time something terrible will happen, does it mean we shouldn't do it? And we can't let people's fear of something that may or may not happen stop us doing the right thing. I also think we need to realise that testing an idea and making it work requires sometimes long-term commitment. I'm really fed up of people who try something and say it hasn't worked in 2 weeks, that it hasn't worked, so we're going to stop. Keep going. You have to keep going. And sometimes that's sort of tricky, isn't it? Are you going to stick with your decision, or are you going to change your mind? And you really have to know what you're doing, but actually sometimes we need to stay with something a very long time. And then, of course, creative communities. And I'm going to go straight on to the next example to talk about that. The hospice choir on the hospice on the Isle of Wight has become a bit of a phenomenon. It's been going just about 2 years. Singing community choirs have become incredibly sort of trendy, haven't they? Everyone seems to be doing it after 20 years ago when no one wanted to do it. And it is quite an extraordinary phenomenon. But we started a choir at the hospice on the Isle of Wight. And I remember thinking, well, it'll take forever to get this going. No one will come. We advertise it a little bit. And they meet on a Wednesday evening. And the first Wednesday evening it started, I was in my office doing some things, and I thought I'll wander down to see how it was going. And suddenly I was confronted by about 60 people on the first night singing at the top of their voices. It's now doubled to around 120 people in membership. It's quite, it's full of what I would call the mad and the bad and the strange to know. People are coming with all kinds of individual need for all kinds of reasons. Patients and families, staff and volunteers, but also members of the local community who just have nowhere to go. I was brought up in a pub in North Wales, and the church was next door. And in the 60s, everyone just moved seamlessly between the two and sorted out their problems. And nowadays, no one goes to church. I live in a pub on the Isle of Wight that's been converted into our home. Pubs have closed down. There's nowhere for people to go. And we need to create opportunities and places for people. And why shouldn't the hospice, which traditionally is a place that people are terrified of, be the place where people want to go to? Because they get treated with kindness. It's not expensive to do that. So this hospice choir is a bit of a phenomenon. So this is a recording of some of them, with a few of them speaking. I asked a couple of months ago, saying, can we make a bit of a recording, because I'd like to use it when I speak. And you see, they've all gone into terrified mode on the film. They're normally a little bit more sort of relaxed and over the top, but hopefully you get a sense of who they are and what they do. Thank you.
Last Easter, on Easter Sunday, I lost my husband at the hospice here after he had a long battle with cancer, and he'd been coming here for a while anyway, and I just began to feel at home here, and when I come through the doors I just feel at home and at peace, and I just carry a sadness inside of me all the time, because we've been married for 44 years nearly, and as soon as I start singing, I just feel joy. And you know, and it just lifts. And that is one of the times I feel my husband is really close to me. Yeah, so I just think it's been a lifesaver to me. It's just been wonderful.
For me, and the singing, I love the singing, but I've made such a lot of friends.
Yeah, it's amazing, like, it's like a community, so you meet all different people, it's super cool.
We just hit it off immediately. She's
We're
very
on the
rude
same
to me, she's very rude
Would
to
you
me, and I can take it without getting cross.
You keep as good as you get.
I do.
There's a cocktail party on Friday, which we will be attending.
At my house. We share together.
Yeah, share again.
We come together. John, you know, is with the men and chats away, and I with the ladies. But it's lovely because we go home and talk about it.
Yeah,
and share.
sing
and
on the way home after the dance.
You know, we sing at home what we've sung here. It's great, isn't it?
It's really good.
Yeah, it is. It is really good.
I did sing in the choir at Manchester Cathedral many years ago, but obviously when the boys come now we can't do it. But it's such a glow, and the lady next to me, we've never met before, she's holding me hand, you know. It's unbelievable. She's holding me hand. To be part of it, even though I've not been as regular as any of these people, it's overwhelming. It's just overwhelming. I'm sorry, I just wrote this. It's an amazing tune. So they just listen to it so happy with it. Not because you're it now, it's because you come.
Well, my husband died 29 years ago now, last Saturday actually, and he died in the hospice, but not this hospice. He died at the hospice in Euston, in London. They started this hospice choir, and I came and joined it with my friends. And it is lovely, and it's such a good thing to help people. You mix with people that have been through the same thing as you, so it does help you.
This choir has given me a whole new lease of life. It really has. I'm 83, but I just love to sing. It's wonderful.
Music uplifts you. As simple as that. And I love it.
Super fun.
Happiness.
Inspiring.
I think a phrase of the music therapist has been overcompensating that again. So just wait for the slides to come back. Thank you. So the arts are not a new addition to health or even to end-of-life care, but I do think they remain marginalised and misunderstood. And I think vulnerable people need a variety of opportunities. And the more different kinds of things we can offer or bring to the table, the better. I think the arts and music give people a way of articulating themselves to themselves, but also to others, allowing things to really matter. Illness is isolating, social death, as I talked about, but opportunities to come together with others beyond suffocating family networks can sometimes be really important. And as we see there in the choir, developing this confidence, and I think confidence is catching, and a really important part of what we can offer. I think they offer the ways of people of engaging with others outside of the numbness of illness and symptoms. You know, sometimes the arts quite brutally pull people into a world, back into a world, to relate with others when they don't have a language to talk about it. Legacies, talisman objects, opportunities to surprise oneself, redressing the balance of taking and giving. I think one of the interesting things around Mary is I knew nothing about her. I didn't need to know anything about her. You know, we get obsessed in healthcare, don't we, of sitting down and saying, tell me what's wrong, tell me what's going on. We don't need to do that. It's completely useless. Opportunities of surprising oneself, as I said, frameworks and context to understand difficult things, and of course offering a variety of different possibilities. I think one of the key things for me is how do we articulate success? You know, if you hadn't heard Mary or seen that choir, how would I have got over to you what was really happening? And I think that's really, really challenging. How do we demystify what we do? Because sometimes it's really, you know, it's self-satisfying to keep it a bit mystical and a bit magical, what we do. It's not helpful. I think visibility is really important, and this is where my bugbear with the arts therapies comes in. This sort of wanting to hide things away in rooms to be private. The arts and music are not private. They're meant to be shared, and exhibiting and performing is all part of that process. I try really hard when I have arts teams in hospices to make them indispensable, because I think if I'm no longer around, you know, what I don't want is someone to come and start cutting them away and taking them away without realising what they're doing. So I think there are lots of questions there that I don't necessarily just want to stay on. But I do think they bring an effective way of meeting some strategic objectives. I think it's really important if you're working in an organisation or in a healthcare sector to understand what is the strategy. What actually does this organisation believe it needs to be doing? And when you understand that, you need to be able to work with it and go with it and offer into that strategy. So, you know, for us, being able to see more people, how are we going to do that? Well, having a choir, a music therapist sees 120 people at once as opposed to just one. You know, that's a real strength to bring to the table. This community, this way we can work in groups is really important. I think they are cost effective, and I think, you know, they do that most godlike thing of bringing order out of chaos. Just very quickly, before I go on to the final extract, you know, what happens when the hospice becomes an art gallery? We have an art gallery at the hospice. We have artists exhibiting every month. We have professional concert series every month. We have a cafe at the heart of it, and that's what the food looks like. One of the Michelin star chefs on the island closes his restaurant regularly and comes and cooks in the cafe. It needs to be the best. You know, we need to attract the best people. And we have all of these events for people to come in and be part of. Why shouldn't the hospice be a place where people want to come to? So, my final extract. Not quite yet, I just want to talk about it before we play it. One day, in the Hospice Cafe, I'm sitting with a colleague having a cup of coffee, and we're probably talking about something incredibly boring. And on the next table, there are a group of young ladies, all of them coming to the end of their life. And as these kinds of things normally happen, I suddenly realising they're having a far more interesting conversation than we are. So we start to eavesdrop. And these women are having a real downer of a conversation. They're talking about how they don't look good anymore. So some of them have lost their hair, some of them have had their breasts removed, some of them are having problems with weight due to medication. And the conversation is going about their clothes don't fit them. When they go out, they don't feel as if they look good, as if people respond to them differently. They were talking around, being afraid of going onto the high street, of going into changing rooms in case anyone came in and saw them while they were getting changed. It was an absolute downer of a conversation. And I sat there and I realised there are two ways of listening to a conversation like that. One is as a therapist and psychologist, where I might say, actually, tell me a bit more about that. That sounds really difficult. Or there's another way of listening to the potential in that conversation. And I remember sitting there thinking, and I said to my colleagues, somebody should be able to do something about that. So what we did, to cut a long story short, we went back to my office and we telephoned the London College of Fashion, go to the best. And I got through to a lecturer on the postgraduate programme and told him who I was, and I told him about the conversation I'd just heard. And I asked him a question. I said, would you like to do something about it? So what happened was a group of postgraduate students came down to the hospice, met these women, and together over a period of 3 or 4 weeks, they each created their own outfit of a lifetime. They then went up to the college with the students and they made them. And at the end of it, they wanted to have a celebration. So we had a fashion show. We hired a jazz band and put it right in the middle of the hospice. And it started playing, and gradually everyone came to find out what was happening. We invited families and friends and all kinds of people as well. But gradually everyone came, and some of the nurses from the inpatient unit came down to complain about the noise, because that's what they do. And gradually everyone came into the space together. And when everyone was there, the ladies came out, walked down a catwalk, and at the end of it, they each spoke about their experience. They wanted to create a talisman object, and what they did, because there were lots of photographs taken, was they created a slideshow of their experience to give to their families and friends as a memento. So what I'm going to do is show you that slideshow. They chose the photographs, they chose the music, and at the end of it, a poem comes up that one of them had written and had read out at the end of the fashion show. I think one of the key things for me, even though it's not obvious, is each of these women have their own story going on. I always think, in the hospice with staff, we all have our backstory going on. And actually how we support each other with that backstory is really, really crucial to how we do our jobs. And sometimes people are good at telling you what's going on in their life, and sometimes people are not so good. But we always realise when something's not okay with people. So these women have their own backstory, so that you see a lady eventually in a pink silk coat coming down the catwalk. Around 6 weeks previous to that, she'd arrived at the hospice for the first time and sat in her car crying because she was too terrified to come into the building. To see her 6 weeks later, beautiful and confident, is extraordinary. There's also a lady who's in orange, you see with a turban, and she walks down the catwalk with a man on her arm. For her, she wanted to create a wedding outfit because she was never going to have the opportunity to get married. So this is their slideshow.
The more
the last couple of slides. Thank you. So the needs for the arts, not only in health but in life generally, have never been greater, but I think we need to remain flexible and up for conversation. We need to get better and take more seriously how we articulate what we do, and I think we need to mind our language. We need to negotiate over price and value. We mustn't overinflate or underinflate our importance and worth. There's a lot of this going on in healthcare. We need to give away what we know, that value of generosity which is in our DNA. We need to be creative and challenging, but match ideas with strategy, both organisational and national. And we need to be careful what we call ourselves. There are far too many names out there going on. So I always say we must be bold always, be disruptive at least once a day. And we must show and instill authority, but with humility and generosity, holding firm to our values, the values of the arts. And we must remain faithful to social justice, staying focused on those who are more likely to be ignored. Who is not sitting in front of us? And where are they? Robert Twycross spoke at Cicely Saunders' memorial service at Westminster Abbey in 2006, and he ended what he said with this. He said, "It's been said that history alternates between charisma and routinization. In this context, charisma refers to the ability of exceptional individuals to act as a catalyst for social change and acknowledges the impact of personality in bringing about radical innovation in institutions and established beliefs. The question for us today is palliative care in danger of moving from the creative and disruptive influence of charisma to the cosy ambience of routinization? Palliative care services, even in Britain, generally have not yet reached their full holistic potential, but movements tend to become monuments. So the best tribute we can give is to make sure that hospice, that palliative care remains a movement with momentum. It's once again time for charisma, and the arts are full of it. Thank you.
On behalf of everybody here, just so grateful to you, Nigel, for sharing so much with us today. And I think touching something in everybody and saying an awful lot that resonates with people here, wherever you're coming from, whatever your perspective is. And I think humanity and discovery are the two words that are in my mind right now. The potential and the joy of discovery, even at a very late stage in a person's life, and the tremendous humanity that you've shown and that exists in the world and that you've reminded us that exists in the world, and what we can do to support that. So, would anyone like to ask Nigel anything? I know we're running over, but we just had a really quick conflab and said let's keep going, and we'll break in about 15 minutes, Claire, will we? Yeah. So, and we'll also have another opportunity later this afternoon in the closing conversation, if we don't get around to everybody. So, and Nigel is here for the day, which is fantastic. So, Toma, is it? Yeah. Just hold on for the microphone if you wouldn't mind, so everyone can hear.
Just a comment and something that we'd all reflect on.
Is the mic on?
No. Hello.
You might need to project, Toma. Yeah. Just project.
Just a comment, that thing about the artist in that managerial role and the efficacy given to everybody, in that position. I think that we just heard some wonderful people with great effect in the world, and just how an artist being up there can kind of break down the structures of hierarchy that we're involved in being patient and being
Other.
Yeah. I think that's a really crucial point, isn't it? And I don't do hierarchy very well, but of course sometimes when you are a chief executive, you are in charge, and sometimes you have to say no, and no, we're not doing that, and to do it with confidence, but also to be able to explain to people why you're making that decision. And if people have had the chance to put their voice across, I think that's all we can do. But sometimes if you know instinctively it's not the right thing to do, you just have to say, we're not doing that. And take that kind of, you have to take that leadership role sometimes. But I think, it comes from confidence and experience, I think.
Tara, and then Barbara Ann.
Just shout.
Yeah, just pitch it up.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. So my name is Tara Byrne, and I run the Beatna Festival, which is the festival that celebrates creativity and the arts in the age. So we have a strong interest in this kind of work, and we run residencies in care settings. And my question to you is, we're always trying to leave a legacy and to influence in what we do for the good. And I know how to influence, I think, the arts and things, but I don't really know how to influence the health policy end of things, other than good practice. And every time we run these residencies, we come to the room staff, and the people who run the care homes, and they can be hospices as well, so that they will talk to whoever this matters at some point. And make it maybe something that they do regularly rather than relying on one-off things which we can do. So it's like, how do we influence health policy situations that is much more intrinsic to those situations? So, there are general activities provided, but that the arts or the creativity is my question.
I think that's a really challenging question. From my own perspective and being in the position I'm in, I have huge influence around what can happen in the organisation that I run. What's very interesting is I see a lot of other organisations wanting to have what we do, but they don't know how to do it. And of course, I think when you're dealing with leaders and managers, you're also dealing with their personal relationship with the arts, and how that's been in their own life and how they think about it. And I think it's how you get into that, into their own understanding and their own experience of it. A lot of people have had really bad experiences with the arts and with music as they've gone through their life. And of course, even though that's not articulated, it's there in their psychology and how they behave. And the arts and sometimes can represent something for them that actually scares them or takes them back to a time when they haven't had a good experience. And there's something around how we are able to open those conversations with people, honestly. But it's really hard to do because you're dealing with human beings with all their complexity. And, I've always found when I've gone to have to defend the arts, I take the examples with me and play them and insist on playing them. Because people can't help it when they hear it. I can say all kinds of things, but as soon as they hear the story of my way or of other things, they want that, somehow want it. I think people have a longing for that kind of thing. So make it personal in some way, I think is really important. But it's hard to get people in that place to have that conversation. I get it. I do get it. The arts aren't everything.
Yeah.
They're important, but they're not everything.
Thank you. My name is Barbara Ann Harkin. I'm the Art and Ageing Fellow at the Irish Museum of Modern Art. So I'm looking at the moment at their dementia inclusive programming in the museum. And one of the things that's come up recently is social prescribing and this notion of social prescribing. And I'm just so curious, after your phenomenal and inspirational presentation this morning, about your thoughts on social prescribing. I suppose I'm asking the question because I'm wondering, in your experience, if you've encountered this in your context, does it change the nature of the engagement? How can we prevent it changing? Does it take some of that, the wonder and the risk out of it, if it's been prescribed to you, an engagement with an arts experience? Thanks.
I think it's interesting how to prescribe is a very healthcare word. And I wonder whether, again, where we get into this language complexity, because we don't have a language to talk about it. So that's one thought about that. I think anything that is offering the arts as an opportunity can only be good. But how we do it and how people understand what we're doing and why is really crucial. I think social prescribing is a way of trying to shoehorn the arts into the healthcare world that we don't quite fit into. It's one way of doing it, and it will have its benefits. And we were talking on the island around whether people can be, whether the choir can be under prescription for people. I don't know. I think people will come to a choir because they want to come to a choir, not because someone tells them it's good for them. So I think it's one thing. It's been around for 20 years or so, social prescribing, and it's suddenly become quite fashionable again as a way of moving forward. I also think as well, what hospices traditionally have done is remove death from communities into buildings, and I do think that museums and concert halls do the same about the arts. And it leaves quite an awkward relationship with, Joe blogs on the street, why would they go to an art gallery? Probably if you served them something nice to eat that wasn't too expensive, maybe. So that it's thinking of ways you're going to get people in. I think food is crucial. It's such a way of drawing people in, and then, what you draw them into, an environment, really matters. So I don't know whether that answers the question, but...
Liam?
Thank you very much. The presentation was absolutely outstanding, and it's been incredible to have you here, so you're very, very welcome, Nigel. I'm still emotionally blown away from listening to you and seeing the presentation. I work as a musician in healthcare myself, with Waterford Healing Arts Trust, with Kids Classics and Training Notes. And we have worked in palliative care and end of life with babies, children, and with adults. You have a team. I can imagine the emotional impact right at the front line for you and for your team. And I just wonder about, and you could probably spend the rest of the day answering this, but just to check in with you and maybe speak later about emotional management for the artist in a setting like that, and particularly with you, it's week in, week out, it's not the odd day. So just in terms of emotional management and the impact on the artist, do you have training in place, or how is that approached? Thank you.
It's probably not a good question to ask me. I've never felt burnt out. I've never felt overwhelmed by it. I don't know whether that's unique. I don't think it is, working with the team that I work with. And I think it was Freud who said, the more you give yourselves in a true and real way, the more you don't get burnt out, in a sense. It was something like that. I see people getting burnt out, but my experience of the people it happens to is not often. And I think it's there's something in those people that the core, the resilient core of themselves, and why they're doing what they're doing isn't quite working for them. So I don't see people getting burnt out often, but I think there is something around sustaining yourself in an organisation that's creative and vibrant and lively, and people manage it, and people are able to somehow compartmentalise experience and realise it's not them. And they're there to help. I'm a great sort of, I was brought up in a pub, and being of service to people is in my blood, whether I like it or not. There's something around, that element of being a servant through music or through work that actually keeps me healthy. So yes, we have support groups, and yes, we talk, people come and tell us their story, and we, if something's going on in someone's life, we try and work it out for them. But on the whole, people just get through the day. So I'm probably not a good person to ask that question. And sometimes when I answer it, it comes across as if I don't quite care about it, but I absolutely do care about it. But what I see is people just being people and being healthy and getting through it. Because dying is normal. And I've been around long enough for it to become normal, whether that's a good thing or not, but it is normal. And I refuse to let it be anything other.
Anybody else for now? Joan.
I just want to say thank you very much for a wonderful and inspiring talk, and all of the examples. And something that really struck me as being inspirational is the idea of making the community part of your work. And good food being so essential to that. And if you bring people in with good food and then you give them meaning and soulfulness and kindness, you make big social change, I think. I think that's just such an exciting concept, and I think we have an opportunity here now with our new building to embrace that. I mean, we have so many public buildings. They're public buildings owned by the public, and they need to be open to the public. It's very, very exciting. And the quality of the food and the art and all of that is only what everybody should enjoy. And then to meet that soulfulness and kindness, it's that, I think, is probably what nourishes the people you work with and keeps them strong as well. Because everybody searches for meaning and soulfulness every day of their life. And if they feel that, like your friend Bill, they will be back, and the community will no longer cordon off the experience of dying. It's just massive. It's so important.
I think kindness is probably the most important thing in life, but it's the most difficult thing to be all of the time. And, I try hard to be kind, but, like anyone else, the tone in my voice can change sometimes. And, if I get in the car and drive home and somebody's driving at 20 miles an hour in front of me, I'll be effing and blinding at them like any other human being. But there's something around a commitment to be kind. And I think particularly when we are using the arts and the craft that we have, the kindness is there for us. We don't have to work very hard at it. So I think kindness is key, but really, really difficult.
Okay, I think a good cup of coffee might be in order for everybody. Nigel, thank you once again so much.